You're listening to American Edition on the Voice of Russia. I'm Rob Sachs. President Obama made a high-profile speech today to an audience of mainly students gathered at the Jerusalem Convention Center, calling for Israelis young and old to believe that a peace can be realized with Palestinians. He said hard work would be needed to be done on both sides.
Given the frustration in the international community about this conflict, Israel needs to reverse an undertow of isolation.
After the speech, the president traveled to the West Bank and met with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Rocket fire from the Gaza Strip marred the visit, though no casualties were reported. Here to talk more about it is Dan Arbel. He's a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. He is a 25-year veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service. Also joining us is Zuhdi Jasser. He is president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and co-founder of Save Syria Now. He's also author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Welcome back to both of you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And Dan Arbel, let's begin with you. President Obama, as we just heard, talked about something, this undertow of isolation. I want to play another clip from his speech today.
No wall is high enough and no iron dome is strong enough or perfect enough to stop every enemy that is intent on doing so from inflicting harm.
So he was talking about Israel needing to engage more and not just relying on its military strength or its defensive capabilities to really end this conflict. What concrete things do you think he's urging and can be done by Israelis?
Well, this is a historic visit by President Obama to Israel. It's the first time that he travels to Israel as president. And in the span of 3 days, which he's going to be spending there, he is meeting with the Israeli leadership and talking to the Israeli people. And this has been an incredible journey so far, in which been very warmly received by Israelis and expressing and voicing and reflecting the deep bonds of friendship and that exist between the American people and the Israeli people, between the two countries, and the unbreakable, unshakable alliance in different fields that exists in the defense area, in the economic sphere, in cultural cooperation, and others. And so the president today spent time in Jerusalem addressing a large audience of students in which he spoke about this friendship, unprecedented friendship between the U.S. and Israel. And in the context of that, he also spoke about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the need for both parties to address this and try and put this conflict behind them, urging both sides to be more flexible, be more forthcoming, be more willing to make compromises. And in that context, he was calling upon Israel as well to act accordingly.
Well, I want to get Zuhdi Jasser's take on President Obama's words today.
As Dan said, it's a historic visit. It's a checkbox that he finally checked and has, I think, made a number of statements that I was glad to hear about reassurance of how close an ally Israel is to the United States and that they are an island surrounded by, I think, countries that are evolving into more and more significant enemies. It was nice to hear him openly describe Hezbollah as a terrorist organization in his speech. I think that it was appropriate and necessary for him to do that. It's interesting that he didn't refer to Hamas in his speech, and I think, some of what I was left with was how vague that while the overtures of friendship and closeness between America and Israel were discussed, if you look at Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech in the UN in September, he talked about how Israel is surrounded by threats and what those threats are and how the Muslim world is going through, if you see in Egypt, Iran, and Syria, the civil war, going through a clash between modernity and Islamism and medieval thought, and he laid that out. President Obama still is not able to lay that out, and I think This was a test to see if he'd do that in Israel, and he did not do that, and yet seemed to make some statements during that somehow there's equal sides and that both sides need to come to the table, etc. I have to tell you, as somebody who's been working very deeply in the Middle East with reform, this is not an equal issue. Israel is a democracy. There are many things that Hamas and other enemies of Israel have to do before they deserve the recognition of their concerns. And I think this sort of moral equivalency, I wish he would have dispelled.
What's your reaction to that, Dan Arbel?
So I think he's making some very good, very, very timely comments. But I think in order to understand that, President Obama I understand the disappointment on one hand. On the other hand, President Obama, before coming to the region, stated on different occasions that he's not coming with any new ideas, new initiatives, new proposals. That the U.S. cannot want a solution more than the parties themselves. And basically this visit is exactly focused as a first visit in his second term outside of the United States, first of all, to show the importance that he attaches to the region, to U.S. policy in the region, to a solution of the problems. But he didn't come with a prescription or with a formula of how to solve this. This is the exact focus of this trip. He's meeting with the leaders of Israel and the Palestinian Authority. He's hearing, and it's going to continue hearing from them today and tomorrow, from Abu Mazen and the Palestinian Authority, from Peres and Netanyahu in Israel, about where there is flexibility, and try and find areas of common ground in which the parties can resume negotiations on the basis of this common ground. But we're not there yet. We're in a very preliminary stage, and I think that explains why he did not spell out exactly what needs to be done. There's also, just one more sentence, there's also sort of the idea of an imposed solution or an imposed U.S. solution to the problem of the Middle East or to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is also something that this administration has come to realize that this is not the way to go. Imposed solutions can be imposed, but then the parties themselves can reject that, and then we're in a stalemate and that can lead to violence. It could lead to all sorts of places that this administration does not want the conflict to go to. So I think all in all, we have to see this as an exploratory first step in what promises to be a continued U.S. presence and involvement in the process, as will be exemplified by John Kerry's return to Israel on Saturday night and his continued talks with Israeli and Palestinian leadership all of next week.
Well, I want to talk about something he did say in terms of an idea, which, again, nothing new, but he again reiterated his support for a two-state solution. Let's take a listen.
Just as Israelis built a state in their homeland, Palestinians have a right to be a free people in their own land.
And Zuhdi Jasser, he spent a lot of time talking about, the rights of Palestinians, coming together, thinking about them, working with Palestinians instead of against them or fearing them. But he did shy away from one significant point that had been made in the past, which is this Israeli expansion of housing settlements in disputed territory, while he did not say he didn't say that they should expand, but he didn't condemn it as he had in the past. He did not say that they must be halted, but only that they hurt chances for negotiations. Do you think this is a significant policy shift with President Obama not demanding clearly for a halt in an expansion of settlements?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's two very different things that you're asking. One has to do with the recognition of a Palestinian state, and I think that issue is we've come to find now in the past few years, since Obama now is in his fifth year, that the Palestinians have a lot of work to do before they can certainly, the statement where he made in his speech that they deserve a state. They have been autonomously running their regions in Gaza and the West Bank. So to say that they're not definitively a state, the only limitations has to do with the ideology of the government in control. And you have Hamas running a region there that has not demonstrated that they're the type of, they're still a terror organization, and I don't think they should be rewarded by being given a state. And, so at the end of the day, that is a significant problem. Judy Miller had a great piece in the Wall Street Journal today that basically said, President Obama, why didn't you go to Rawabi and visit and see a Palestinian planned city that's in the West Bank, but yet showed how a private company had been thriving and had been building, and one of the creators, Bashar Masri, there, she quotes as saying that, this is how you build a state, is through this thriving. He took a risk and built a business, and that's what President Obama should have gone to visit, was her point. I think she makes a very good point. The second very different issue you're mentioning is about the settlements. And I think, there's no evidence that that's Israeli policy. There are certainly people that are building there, and they're being allowed to expand. But I do not believe that, I think that's a distraction from the reality of what's limiting peace, which is the Hamas situation. And lastly, let me just interject. We can't, I find it almost an obsession that when our president, Bush or now Obama, goes to Israel, they focus on this peace process with Hamas, when in fact Israel is in a very complicated neighborhood. And there are other countries at stake here that also need to be addressed, from Iran, which is the most significant threat to Israel, to Syria and on. And I think there's an focusing on the dysfunction that's happening and been chronically as it relates to Hamas continuing to run the Palestinian territory.
Dan Arbel, your thoughts on that, and specifically this policy shift potentially with not calling out Israel to stop expanding settlements?
Well, I think that, as you said, all that President Obama said, he did not introduce any new ideas or notions that, his words did not deviate from U.S. policy as we know it has been there for years, both on settlements and the end of occupation and the two-state solution. And by the way, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his joint press conference with President Obama last night, reiterated and made it very clear as to his own and his new government's own commitment to the two-state solution. So there's nothing new with that. I think regarding the settlements and the building of settlements, I think that this administration has been burned in the first term by clinging to the issue of settlements, putting it very early on in the first term at the top of their agenda, demanding Israel to halt building, construction, etc. Finally, it backfired because Israel had this settlement freeze, building freeze for 10 months that did not produce the results it wanted. It created great expectations on the Palestinian side that here comes a new administration that is going to deliver Israel on a silver platter. That did not happen. And so I think this new the new team around the president and the president himself have learned the lesson from their first term, and they're not going back they do not plan to repeat that mistake again. Rather, they're going to have an incremental, gradual approach, looking at what the parties are willing to do, what the parties are willing to offer, and then identify, as I said, common ground on which to build upon for the future, trying to as they look to resume negotiations.
That's Dan Arbel. He is a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. He is also a 25-year veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service. We're also joined by Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and co-founder of Save Syria Now. Thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your analysis.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.